Welcome back. We are also welcoming back IRAs for the third time in this sequence. We're obsessed with IRAs, but it's for a good reason. They're super helpful, they're awesome retirement investment vehicles, and they kind of look like the name IRA. And so I imagine that this man over here is sort of the physical manifestation of an IRA, and we'll call him IRA. All right, quiz time. This is from another text. On a 1 to 10 scale, give yourself a little quiz. Okay, so pause this, calculate it out, and see where you're at. Go down the list, ask yourself these questions about how interested you are in your own financial affairs, kind of thinking forward into the future. What do you want to do with this stuff? 1 to 10 scale, right? 10 is like, I'm super interested in these things. 1 is, I don't care at all. Afterward, add up all these numbers and divide by 6, because that's the number of questions on here. All right, hopefully you paused it. Hopefully you also got a number somewhere between 1 and 10. If you did not, then you somehow did it wrong. And that could be its own indicator of whether or not you should be managing your finances. If you got a pretty low number, then you might want to consider hiring a financial services professional at some point in your life, at least to get you started planning your finances. If you're at the high end of the scale, you're probably a finance major, right? You're probably really into this stuff. I did this last year, whenever that was, eons ago, and I came up with a pretty low number, actually, that maybe I should be asking for help. This year, I think my number is actually probably around 6 or so. I've gotten definitely more interested in managing my own finances. Besides, I think a financial advisor would look at what I'm doing with finances and say, like, that doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to feel that loss of sadness, sorrow, so I'm just going to manage it myself. So, thinking about the long term, we talked about long-term care, we've talked about life insurance. Now we're really thinking about retirement, right? Another look at retirement. What is it going to look like for us? You'll have the chance to explore that this term in other ways as well. But when we're thinking about long term, we have to sort of define, like, well, how long, right? Like, when am I going to retire? How far away is that? Does my retired future self exist? If you look at the numbers, it's interesting to see the progression. Like back in 1936, people were setting up Social Security and things like that. People lived to be about 70 years in the United States. Now it's about 80 years, right? That's a big difference. Like before, retirement wasn't maybe quite as long, and now it can be a really long time. I like to cite my grandfather, who's been retired more years than he worked. Like a lot more at this point. And he's been retired like 40 years or almost that, around that. And I'm like, wow, you figured it out, Grandpa. Also, he's on a pension, so he's set. In the past, these pension plans were common, guaranteeing you some kind of payout for life. They're not that common anymore. That's one reason why I work for the university, though, is because it's one of the few places you can still get a pension is in the government. I just consider it part of my salary, and then I don't have to worry about my salary. Defined benefit plans are, this is what a pension technically is, or at least most pensions are, and they offer you this guaranteed payout, right? So you retire, and at the point you retire, they do a calculation based on how long you worked and how much you made, or other factors, whatever your deal happened to be. And then that's the amount you make no matter how long you live. So if you live a month, you get that 1 month. If you live 50 years, they have to pay you for 50 years, unless, they make a new law or something. Defined contribution plans are what most people tend to have for their retirement. This is something that you've set up, either your employer has helped you set up or you've set up on your own. And this is where you say, okay, well, we can't guarantee a payout, but we will potentially help you put in money into this account that you can save for retirement, or at least we'll just set up the account that you can put in money yourself if they really want to be mean. So if it's difficult to get a pension, or if that's not something that you're chasing after, or it's unlikely that you're going to get one, the next best option you have is really to start saving today. And it's not that a pension is like the perfect, retirement solution either. It's just, it simplifies things, right? Because you don't have to think about, oh, do I have enough money stashed for this? It's, oh, well, that is a defined benefit. Like, I will get that after I retire. And then maybe I need to supplement it, with another retirement, but it's not like that part is a mystery. Whereas the other parts of retirement planning and saving can be a little bit more mysterious. So you probably want to start saving early. How much will you need to save? Well, it depends, right? How much do you want to live? Like, how long do you want to live? Such a bad question to ask, such a macabre question. Estimate how much you will need on the day you retire to maintain your desired standard of living. And estimate how much of your current income you should save each year to reach your financial goals. So, I mean, that's the, it's the simplest possible way of looking at it, and probably the least useful way of looking at it, right? So, like, decide how much it's going to cost you to be retired, and then look at, this percentage that I'm going to have to save. And people say, 10%, 12%, 15%, like you can save those amounts towards retirement. You'll probably retire at some point, but it depends on you, right? So think about your own needs, think about your own situation, your career trajectory. What are you going to want to replace? What kind of expenses will change when you're retired? So one thing we look at to make this estimation is we think about your average income over your career, right? What is that going to look like, and how much is that today? Like what the value of that is today. Wage replacement rate for retirement living, we're basically saying you're trying to replace about 3/4 of the money that you currently make. If you're making money right now. If you're not, then go make some money first, and then we'll talk about it. Although really, if you think about retirement before you have a job, that's probably honestly the best way to do it, because you have that much more time to save. But anyway, you don't need to make the same amount in retirement that you make today, right? And why is that? Well, it's because in theory, a lot of your expenses will have gone down in retirement, right? Like maybe you're not commuting to work anymore. Maybe you're not paying a mortgage on a house anymore. Maybe we'll live on clouds at that point. Who knows? You don't need to be 100% replacing your working income. If you can, that's great, but that's not really a retirement goal, right? Because that shouldn't be necessary. And part of it's because you're also counting on Social Security to hopefully kick in to help out with some of that and so on, and you're not paying the same taxes that you'd be paying currently. And that's like, even just the taxes alone, that's about a 7-8% hit right there that you're avoiding. Yeah, you don't have to buy work clothes all the time, so on and so forth. Sit around the house naked, much cheaper that way. Note that your medical costs might go up. They might massively go up. And maybe things like traveling and stuff, if that was part of your retirement goal, will also cost you more money. So it's not like all your expenses disappear. It's just that some of them will probably shift to other categories or possibly go away. So how much are you going to get in Social Security? Well, like IRAs keep coming back, Social Security also keeps coming back this year. I think it's the third time we visited it. It's a pay-as-you-go system, which means it's not paid for in the future, right? It means that the current people who are working and being taxed are paying the funds that are helping the retirees right now, which we already talked about might be an issue as we have fewer and fewer people in the workforce in the future and more retired people in the future. But like Congress, we can just keep kicking that can down the road, right? So the benefits are going to be based on the highest 35 years of income that you had. Social Security is going to calculate based on those 35 years. It's going to average those to tell you like how much you get when you're retired. Now, Social Security is unlikely to go away, but it might not pay out the full amount in the future either. Currently, the way it stands right now, you can get a reduced benefit, Social Security, at age 62. That's the earliest you can start claiming it for retirement. But you have to work until you're 67 if you want to get full benefits. And it might be higher than that in the future, who knows. So your responsibility is trying to figure out how much you need to save to sort of fill in the gap that Social Security is not going to be giving you. And the trick is Social Security is only replacing, a certain percentage of your income based on how much you make, right? And so it gets a little bit complicated. So I've just chosen like 4 different numbers here to kind of give us an idea. So if you made $23,000, that was the average career income that you had. And let's say that you're trying to replace about 75% of your income in retirement, because again, some of your expenses have gone away. Then what you're looking for is you're looking for Social Security to replace 44% of your original income. That's how much they will replace. And the percentage that you need to replace is about 31%, because we're subtracting that wage replacement, right? So sorry, again, this is math and you know how we feel about that. But so you have 100% wages is 23,000, 70 frogs percent. Replacement rate is do math. It's like what? It's 17,000, right? And then, so we need, and then Social Security is going to cover 44%. So what's 44% of 17,000? Oh gosh. It's like 7,000 maybe. So I'm really trying to replace about a third of what I made originally. So about 8,000 I need, or over here it says 7,000. That's the exact number, but hey, estimation works. So really it just means I need to save, it'd be nice if this was like $200,000 or something, because then we're estimating that you can make about a 4% rate a year on that money. And so if you save up 178,000, you're able to invest it in a way that you're getting about 4% a year in returns, which, it's probably doable. It'll last you until you die, in theory. Again, see, all these things are so speculative because, like, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I don't know how much money I really need. But this is the basic estimation that Social Security is doing. Okay. Now, if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're making an average of 120,000 over the course of your career, and you're trying to replace again about 75% of that, well, the amount of income you'll have to replace is about 64K, which means at retirement you need to have saved 1.6 million. Just a little more, but potentially doable as long as you're saving that chunk out of your wages each time. So this is the number that you're really looking at, this F column over here, is what do I need to save in order to be pretty much safe to retire on that? Maybe you don't even assume that you'll make 4% returns, maybe 3.5%, in which case, again, you need to save more money. So the required retirement savings rate, if you're trying to hit one of these digits, is shown down here in red. So if you're trying to save up for, to retire on this salary, you need 180,000 to retire, then you got to start saving about 7% at age 25. If you don't start saving until you're 35, an old man like me, you got to save up almost 13% a year to get that retirement goal. That's a chunk, right? And if you don't start saving until you're 45, you got to save a quarter of your income each month for retirement, to retire at this point. So you notice, what do you think? Do you think it's easier to start saving 7% of your income at age 25 or to start saving 25% of your income at age 45? If you start saving 7% at age 25, you won't even notice it by the time you're 35, right? And you'll have those years and that accumulated wealth invested. Now, if you're trying to get, if you're on the other end of the spectrum here, you're trying to save up almost $2 million for retirement, you just start saving 12%, 13% at age 25. But again, if you wait until you're 45, you're going to save almost half your income each month for retirement. And that seems like extremely difficult to do. So magically, if you start saving early, the market will take care of you. So there's a whole, again, we're doing this all predicted based on how we expect to live or how long we expect to live. And that's a really hard thing to do. But keep in mind that as your income increases, the amount of money you need to save does increase as well. Because again, you have to replace that amount of income in retirement. Unless you make, $200,000 and then you're okay retiring on $20,000, which is going to be a bit of a lifestyle change, I think. Retirement savings rate will actually remain constant, or pretty constant, as a percentage of your income, which is interesting as well. So in theory, again, if you start early, you can make this huge amount of money just by getting yourself in the habit of saving, and then you retire, and then you coast until you run out of money and die at the end. Your assets peak around age 65 if you retire then, and then they hopefully will last a while. Investments will still do their wibble wobble, and you try to ignore it. And then make sure you don't live too long, right? Don't outlive your money. Well, then you get Medicaid. Yay. Okay. Survey time. If the thought of running out of money at the end of your life, or the idea of Social Security disappearing, or maybe your pension getting torn up, or whatever it is, it could change how you plan for retirement. So here's your survey. Which of these two options are you going to take? We're back to gambling again, right? So option 1, you can gamble on a 10% chance to win $95 or a 90% chance to lose $5. So like I'll spin the wheel. 90% of the wheel is I'm taking $5 away from you. There's a 10% slice on the wheel where you win $95. Do you take that gamble? All right, here's another one. Let's say you pay $5 to buy a lottery ticket that offers a 10% chance to win $100. So much math. And a 90% chance to win nothing. Hey, I would like pay $5 for a 0.001% chance to win a big lottery. Because I'm stupid. Would you take that? Would you pay for a 10% chance to win $100, 90% chance to win nothing? And what's the expected value? Well, oddly enough, the second one down here actually is more popular than the first one. Why do you think that is? One feels more like a sure loss and the other one doesn't. Taking away money means something to us. It feels less like a loss because you're paying to try to win, right? So here, paying $5 for a lottery doesn't feel like I'm getting billed, but the first one feels like I'm getting billed, and I don't like getting bills, right? Richard Thaler found out that we believe costs are not losses. Now here's where things get really interesting, right? So we've been talking about prospect theory for a couple of weeks and how we are not rational econs, we are strange humans. And so we've talked about how losses hurt more than wins, right? That's become a pretty familiar adage by this point in the year. But now we're reframing that a little bit. Let's say not all losses feel like losses. Costs don't feel like losses. So like the fee to play doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like, neutral, just like an attempt to win something, right? But it's still a loss of money, isn't it? So think about this. When you look at a gas station and it has like numbers up and it says, $75 for a gallon. I'm making this future proof, so this will apply in the future. And then, but if you use cash, it's only $74 a gallon. Is that a cash discount or is there a credit card surcharge, right? Well, depending on how they frame it, makes you more willing to, accept it as no big deal. Like if they say, there's a penalty if you use a credit card, people will be like, well, I better use credit. But if they're just like, hey, just so you know, like if you pay with cash, you get a little bonus. They'd be like, that's good to know, right? It's like avoiding the loss, a little bit complicated in that situation. This is really a framing effect. We talked about frames probably way back in 411. And this is a cognitive bias that occurs when we make decisions based on whether the options have positive or negative connotations. So it's not just what it means, it's how it's presented to us that matters, right? So here's what happens when things get framed in our brain. So we've already talked about the prefrontal cortex. This is where we get our motivation from. This is where we make our decisions. This is where system 2 lives. This is where a lot of our emotions work. Now we've got, our limbic system here in the middle, and right here, this little green P. It's not really green in real life. It's the amygdala. I don't think it's green. And this is where we remember things that are scary. It's just what it does. It's sort of our it's where we internalize fear and avoidance of risk and things like that because it's there to keep us from getting hurt, essentially. But we make really strong emotional decisions there, right? We see, there's the man in black, but I gotta run away, right? Because I saw him once and he shot somebody. I vaguely remember The Stand. It's such a long book. Anterior cingulate is the attention allocation piece of our brain. So this is where we think about getting rewards. This is where we focus our attention. This is where we make sort of ethical decisions, things like that. Pretty interesting. It's also where we stop ourselves from doing our first impulse, which is what? That's system 1, right? So really this thing is system 2. It's calming us down a little bit. So what's interesting is these different parts of your brain are all talking to you all the time, right? And they sort of frame how we look at decisions and what we end up choosing based on those decisions. So when an outcome is framed 2 different ways, like for example saying, you can keep $20 or you can lose $30, we show a framing effect, which means we interpret that very differently depending on how it's set up. If somebody says, this is a situation where you can keep something, like I'm giving you something, we're more likely to go with the sure thing. And that makes sense because, again, we don't want to lose something that we feel like we have. The amygdala is most likely to be active when choices are conformed to a frame. And we use emotional words like keeping and losing, right? We don't like losing, again. And this emotional stimuli is a trigger for system 1. And then the anterior cingulate is more active when things, when we're making a more reasoned choice or forcing system two to get involved. We're not just doing our first instinct, right? It's kind of what this anterior cingulate is there for. It's to kind of push us towards system two. So the most rational subjects, it turns out, are the least susceptible to framing effects, and they have more activity in the prefrontal lobe, right, frontal part of the brain, where emotion and reasoning get mixed together to solve problems for us. And we do this. I mean, everybody does this. It's not like somebody's rational, somebody's not. It's just when we're making more rational decisions, so to speak, you get more activity up front. What's interesting is, like I say, it's not just us, right? We're not just dumb people. It's like everybody does this, right? So physicians who are, presumably relatively intelligent people, although some of you might want to debate that, I don't know. They're asked to compare a 1-month survival rate. So saying like somebody has a disease or an injury or something, and it's likely that they will survive, 90% of the chance they will survive the next month, versus saying, oh, this patient has a 10% mortality rate, like 10% chance they're going to die in the next month. Most physicians are like, oh, I'm going with the survival rate of 90%. Well, it turns out a survival rate of 90% and a mortality rate of 10% is exactly the same thing, right? It means 90% chance you live, 10% chance you die. But physicians, you'd think, would know that, people who deal with life and death and have studied ideas at some point in their lives and thought about things somewhere along the way, I would hope. 84%, so better than 4 out of 5 of them, go with that survival rate frame and say, oh, this sounds better. This is what I want to go with. This is the thing. This is the choice I'm making. I'm going with a survival rate of 90%. It's like the framing of those words changes their decisions because it should be 50-50, right? They should see that this is exactly the same thing. It doesn't matter how you frame it. But reframing things, even for intelligent people, experienced people, experts, they still distort their responses based on the frames that they get. And that's because system 2 is lazy. And system 1 says, oh, this must be our reality. And it doesn't see that we're in a frame, right? We don't analyze the frame. Here's an application for you. Here's a hypothetical disease, okay? So let's say that the U.S. is preparing for an outbreak of a disease that originated in Antarctica, of all places, and the disease is expected to kill 600 people, okay? Not great. 2 approaches have been raised, so people are saying, well, we can do one of 2 things. And scientists have looked at, the odds of one thing leading to another. And they say, okay, here's one option. Program A says we're going to lead 200 people to be saved. Like, we're going to make sure 200 people are saved, Program A. Saved for sure. Program B says, okay, well, it's a 1/3 probability that we're going to save all 600 people, and a 2/3 chance that we're going to save none of them. You might notice, looking at this, the expected value is the same between these 2 choices, right? The expected value of that second one is that 200 people will be saved, right? Because 2/3 chance 0, 1/3 chance 600. I don't know what to do with fingers anymore. And that's the same expected value. So in theory, you should choose Program A or Program B equally because they both expect to save 200 people on average. But let's say it's a little bit different, okay? So now we've got Program A prime. Let's say that Program A prime will lead to 400 people dying for sure. 400 people are definitely going to die. And Program B prime has a 1/3 chance that nobody dies and a 2/3 chance that 600 will. Once again, you might notice the expected value is still the same. 400 people dying in the first option, and it is the average, expected value of the second one is that 400 people die as well. So it should be 50-50, right? Well, it's not, of course, right? When you look at these things, you already can tell. Framing it as saying we can save people, make people act a certain way, and saying people are going to die makes people act differently. Like, the words matter to us even if the values are exactly the same. How you frame it matters. And when outcomes are framed in a good way, we tend to be risk averse. And we say, well, let's not gamble. Let's go with the sure thing, right? 200 people are going to be saved. Let's do that. But if they say 400 people are going to die, I'll say, okay, let's gamble. Let's risk it. And that's exactly the same thing, right? How come the frame made me decide to behave differently? And now I really wonder what I'm thinking when I'm investing, right? Because how many frames are overlaid on that I can't decipher? Being risk averse or risk seeking is based on the framing, not on the reality. $200 sure versus $400 maybe, right? We're not good at evaluating these things. We can't do it. System one can't do it. And system two doesn't have enough like intuition in some ways to even solve these problems correctly. So system one says, that's okay, I got it. I understand this. Think about tax framing. It's not just about these life and death decisions. Other things get framed too. There's Thomas Schelling's version of this. The question, should the child exemption in the tax code be bigger for rich people than for poor people? Now there's a loaded statement, right? Like if a candidate for government, position actually said something like this, people would be mad. Luckily, I'm a nobody, so I can say what I want. Child exemption in the tax code should be rich, should be bigger for the rich than for the poor. And you might think like, well, devil's advocate, maybe rich people do need more money because maybe their kids cost more. Even that sounds awful, doesn't it? No, maybe it like costs more money to put them through their private schools and get them their fancy Lexus and all, what, or Audi, or I don't know what they're driving these days. I've never really associated with the rich. You could probably make some argument for that, but that would not be a popular argument, right? Why should rich kids get more than poor kids? Why should rich parents get more than poor parents? This assumes that families have a default of 0 children. But what if the default assumption is that they have 2 kids per family? Oh, this changes things. Okay, another question related to this. Let's say the default, everybody has 2 kids. We're just assuming every family out there has 2 kids for some reason. It's up to 0. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Should the childless poor pay as large of a surcharge as the childless rich? People don't want to go along with that, right? They're like, what? No. People who are poor and have no children should not be paying more. So system one says no to the first one and no to the second one. Rich should not be getting a bigger tax exemption. And the poor should not be paying a bigger tax surcharge just because they don't have kids, right? But it turns out that those two things are actually opposites, so how can we say no to both of them? The same thing from 2 different sides, right? So I love learning how like completely inconsistent our brains are. It makes me feel better about my life. These two things are logically inconsistent. It's based on just how we feel based on the frame. Like surcharge makes us feel a certain way, exemption makes us feel a certain way, rich and poor, all that kind of stuff. And system 2 says, I'm already dead, right? So how we ask questions is just as important as what we ask, because we can say no to both of these even though they are opposites, and logically one of them should probably be a yes. So how are you going to do this? How are you going to deal with all this? Well, you're going to try to be as rational as possible when you start, even though we know we're not very rational. The National Institute of Retirement Security says the U.S. households, on average U.S. household has not saved much for retirement, and that's probably pretty easy to guess if that is the case. In fact, the number is about $10,000 is the median retirement account balance. Median, right? That's disconcerting, and numbers like that make me think that we should have like a more fleshed out version of Social Security or some kind of national retirement system, because who's going to be able to retire if that's how much people have saved on average? And the people, you might say, oh yeah, well, they're far away. Well, no, they're not. The people near retirement age, the average they've saved is $12,000. How long is that going to get you? Like half a year? So what's system one doing now? What frameworks are you getting from that sort of a terrifying number? Well, there are other places to get some help. A defined contribution plan, these are the retirement accounts that you fund, right? These are the 401ks, these are the IRAs. These are not a pension plan, it's not a guaranteed payout, but it is something that in the end could be worth more than a pension depending on how your investments go. And I would just say this flat out, if your employer offers some kind of defined contribution plan, retirement plan, you should participate in it. Especially if they give you a match, you absolutely should do that. 401k, you can put a lot of money in there each year. I think we're up to like 19,500 or something like that. Please use that. If there's a match in there, please use it. That's hugely valuable to you. Some plans will match your contribution, right? So maybe they offer a 100% match on the first 6% you pay. So that means if you put in 6% each month into retirement savings, they're going to match that 100%. They're going to put in 6% too. And suddenly you're saving 12% a month, which remember that was that magic number earlier, that if you started saving at 25, it was going to get you your 2 million retirement dollars. And you're only losing 6% a month to do that, right? And there's probably a tax deduction involved as well. Boy, this gets better and better, doesn't it? Usually there's a vesting period, how long it takes for you to actually be able to, take that retirement account with you. So if you work for a company for 1 month and then leave, you're probably not going to be able to take your full retirement with you. But it all just depends on who you work for and what their rules and policies are. The nice thing is, again, like this gives you a tax deduction because it's excluded from your current taxable income, right? Now you might pay taxes on it when you pull it out in the end, but put that off. If you're not offered a plan though from your employer, open an IRA, an individual retirement account. We've talked about those a lot this year. Here's some of the more common defined contribution plans. 401k, a lot of people get these. Pretty common, benefits are going to be based on the contributions that you put into that. So these get invested and you might lose money, but you probably won't lose money in the long term, right? 403Bs are pretty similar, but they're for nonprofits and they're also for public education, that sort of thing. Similar, again, you can both make pre-tax contributions, so you're not paying money on money that you don't use. There's also 457Bs, which are pretty similar, but that's for state and local government. And then there's thrift savings plans, which are kind of like a 401k, but it's for employees of the federal government. So if you see any of these things, like just know they're all sort of in the same world, right? And if you can sign up for any of them, please do it, because every dollar you contribute reduces your present taxable income. Any matching you get is free money. And when you're looking at jobs, think about that, right? Like what gets offered. You can find out ahead of time if they list it in the job description, like what is the 401k matching, or what is the what kind of defined contribution plans do they offer, or look it up on their sites, or ask a current employee, or whatever you do. Like do your research and factor that in, right? Because just because somebody's like, oh yeah, we'll pay you $5,000 more a year to work here, it's like, well, that's great. But maybe I would have gotten a lot more value out of having this like 5% match from a company, or 3% match, or whatever it is, right? So know everything you can about the value of that before you take a job, if you can help it at all. The money you grow in that account is tax deferred, so you only have to pay taxes when it's distributed, right? Now, under current law, at 70.5 years, you must begin withdrawing your retirement account. This is the guy that comes and says, you got to retire, man. Obligatory withdrawals are known as required minimum distributions. If you don't pull it out, they start just taking it, basically, so you have to pull it out. If it's not taken, I mean, that's what it is. It's 50% tax applied. So they're just like, okay, we'll collect if for some reason you don't want this money. Why on earth you would not be taking your retirement by 70.5? It just means you love your job, and that's actually ideal. So, and if you try to go the other way, if you withdraw before 59 and a half years old, usually you pay a 10% penalty and you pay income tax on the distribution. So it's not ideal, but if you're in a crazy financial bind and you need to get that money out, it's possible to do that. Also note that almost all defined contribution retirement funds require you to choose the investments in the account. And so you can go with, I want to put it in domestic bonds, or, I want to put it into, foreign stocks, or whatever you want to do. Like, it's just up to you, right? So there is some risk that you're going to assume, and depending on how far from retirement you are, you want to evaluate, maybe I need to be a little riskier, right? Or maybe I'm really close to retirement. Let's just dump everything in bonds and cash and be real careful over here, right? Whatever you're doing, like just be thinking about how soon am I going to need this money? Like when am I going to retire? Ideally, you're trying to earn this rate of 4.5 or 4 to 5% each year. If you can do that, that's awesome, because then you're beating inflation, right? But if you really want to get that amount on top of inflation, you're thinking like 8%. Can you make 8% a year on your investments? After the last month, I'm not entirely sure, for myself at least. Mutual funds, things like target date funds are great, because they'll do that sort of sorting out for you of how close you are. If you're far away, they're going to be riskier. If you're closer, they're going to get safer. Sort of takes care of a lot of the decision making for you, if that's your preference. When you are investing in retirement funds, if you use employer-sponsored retirement plans well, you might be able to retire earlier, or save more for later, which is great. Let's say you're earning 70K at 30 years old, like you're doing pretty well. If you're contributing 6% of your income to a 401k plan, your employer matches 3% of the income in the plan, and let's say you're able to keep your investments in pretty good shape, you're making 8.5% return. That means by age 65, you have 1.2 million saved in that account without ever having to pay more than $350 a month in any year. Now, $350 a month sounds like a lot, but to have it be a guarantee that you can retire when you want to retire, that's not that bad, right? Look, the graph is going up. It's a good thing. I'm framing it. I'm framing it well. Once you find a group committed to financial independence, you might also pursue it too. So if people are around you are also chasing retirement, like if you work in a place where people are thinking ahead, it helps you think ahead as well, right? If people are taking the retirement options seriously and they're talking about saving and that kind of thing, like it rubs off on you, right? If you're in a place where you feel like everybody's just kind of living for today, like that's fine too, but it might not help you with your long-term goals. And when you get sort of maxed out on willpower and you just want to spend money, like yesterday, I bought a NFL jersey because they were on clearance, and I just like doing that. And even though I was losing a bunch of money in the markets, I was like, I don't care, I want to spend money. My willpower meter was sort of depleted. But at the end of the day, markets will come back. I'll have this sweet jersey for next year. IRAs, we've talked about so much. I'm just going to skim over these things. But they have valuable tax benefits, right? It can protect your assets from creditors, oddly enough, which is kind of nice, potentially. You can access retirement savings in case of emergency, like we talked about the Roth IRA. You can pull out the principal if you need it. And it allows you to make those contributions that are tax deductible if it's a traditional IRA. They offer the tax deduction. Basically, if you don't have a retirement plan offered from your employer, start an IRA. Remember, we're talking about maxing about $6,000 a year for these, but that's not too bad. That's a significant amount of money that you can save. Again, the 401ks and all that, the max limit each year is about $19,500 right now. It'll be up a little bit in the future. But again, if you can max that and get some match, and then you can also, put money elsewhere, like, go for it. I'm so tired of IRAs. They're so useful, though. I'm just tired of thinking about them. You're probably exhausted from thinking about them, too. But if nothing else, just know that the fact that they came up so much this year means they're really good for you. They're a good option. Traditionally, you open an account, you pick how you want it invested, and you just hopefully keep putting the money in. This is the important thing, too. It's one thing to open the account. It's really easy to do that. But you got to somehow create that pattern, that habit where you're going to be putting in the money each month. It's going to be automatically deducted maybe so you don't even see it from your paycheck. Whatever you do, find a way to make it automatic. Put that money away for later. Let's say if you're 30 and you've got a 22% tax margin, keep in mind that if you put all this into a traditional IRA, you'd be paying the taxes out later. Oh, there's so much math on this page. When it's distributed at the end, maybe you're going to pay out, what is that? $160,000 in taxes. Oof. Roth IRAs, on the other hand, are kind of nice because you don't have to do that end stage taxing. You just don't get the tax exemption along the way. They do distribute tax-free as long as you're 59 and a half years old or older, and as long as you've had the account for 5 years or more. Or if you're dead. If you're 30 and you have that 22% tax margin, again, you don't get the tax deduction today, but in the end, oh, hey, it adds up to exactly the same value as traditional IRA. So maybe it doesn't matter that much whether you do traditional or Roth IRA. Except the Roth, you can always pull out that principal for your emergency fund. So, hey, which one are you going to be on? Which team, traditional or Roth? Well, it's up to you. It's just about thinking where your taxes are going to be in the future. If you're under age 30 and your investment portfolio is about 60% or more of stocks, general rule is you're better off contributing to a Roth and getting tax-free income in retirement. If you're not under 30, then the rules have changed, right? But that's sort of your going, principle in the back of your mind is you might be better off with the Roth if you're choosing one or the other. Remember, you do have to have earned income to contribute at the max $6,000 in 2020 and 2021 as well. You got to start distributing by the time you're 70 and a half. But again, can you imagine? That's a good life if you're still working at 70 and a half, isn't it? Or a really bad life. It's one or the other. Either you love your job or you absolutely hate it at that point. Um, can you automatically do this stuff? Can you set it up for yourself? Well, if your employer doesn't offer you a retirement plan, open your own IRA. It's easy to do this online in brokerage accounts. Choose what you want to do and say, like, maybe every month I want $200 taken from my check, or $100, or whatever it is, and make those constant ongoing contributions. For a while you won't even feel them, and you're building this stack of wealth in the background. And then look at your investments and see if they're working or not. Even Mario once in a while has to decide whether or not it's worth moving his money around. Make sure you watch this. You can also roll over the IRA. So if you get it somewhere and you want to bring it with you, you get a new job, things change, you can do that. The average American changed jobs 7 or more times in their career. Are you average? Are you above average? I hope I'm below average. Well, yeah, I'm probably going to end up being right about that. The IRS has IRA rollover, which simplifies moving your retirement accounts around. So if your employment ends, you can roll a 401k or a similar plan into a traditional IRA. However, if you want to roll into a Roth IRA, you need to actually have a Roth IRA already, right? Because otherwise, it's like I'm avoiding taxes on the front and on the back, and Uncle Sam frowns at that, right? He says, you got to pay me one or the other, or both, ideally. So you can do this directly. You can just have it transacted, from one account to another. This is the best way to do it. Just, go online and be like, hi, brokerage, please send this to other brokerage. Or, hi, brokerage, here's this account. Please send it to this new account. And they'll just do it for you, right? Or you can make it way more complicated. If you do it, if you're having a retirement account paid out to you and then you're planning to put it into a new account, just know that if you hold that for 60 days, you have to start paying taxes on it. So please don't do that. You really don't want to do that. That would be really stupid. So do it automatically. Traditional IRAs can be rolled over into traditional or Roth, or other retirement plans. Interesting. Did I lie to you a minute ago? I think I did. Roths can be rolled into other Roths. Oh, sorry, they can't. Yes, no, I did not lie to you. I almost did. I'm sorry, I can't read anymore. Roths can be rolled into other Roths, but not in traditionals. And it's because, again, like if I'm not paying taxes here or there, that's a problem. Like if I'm getting a tax advantage here in a traditional IRA, I can't also get a tax advantage when I cash out at the end. I mean, it's sort of confusing, but start a Roth. Okay, they're just so much more flexible. Big picture retirement planning. Win multiple retirement accounts. Hopefully you can stay on top of those things. Keep them diversified. Look at the earnings, and don't look every day, but look quarterly or look yearly or whatever you need to do, and make sure that I'm getting out of this what I need to get out of it, and plan accordingly because maybe your goals change along the way. In your 20s, if you put 10 to 15% of your paycheck away towards retirement, you can probably reach your goals. If you start saving in your 30s, you need to bump that up 5%. If you start saving in your 40s, you need to save maybe almost half your income in order to be able to retire on time. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all the choices, again, look for target date mutual funds. Look for things that are simple and clear, and they're aiming for a year, and they're automatically diversified so you don't have to worry about picking and choosing every individual fund that you're in. Again, the nearer you are to retirement, the more important it is that you get into things that are more stable and less volatile. But early on in your savings, you can kind of just hang it all out there. And that's something you can talk about with a financial advisor if you get concerns. But having the right framework is really important, right? Like looking at things from the right lens is going to help you make better rational decisions. So for example, a couple more examples of this. Which of these two drivers is going to save more gas if they drive the same distance in a year? So driver A is switching from 12 mile per gallon truck to a 14 mile per gallon truck. Driver B switching from a 30 mile per gallon car to a 40 mile per gallon. You might think, oh, well, obviously, 10 miles per gallon savings. Oddly enough, A will save more because that's just how bad it is to drive a 12 mile per gallon truck. 2 mpg better is significantly more than the 10 mpg for the car. A better frame of reference could help, though. Instead of looking at miles per gallon, you might look at gallons per mile, which actually makes this question much clearer if you flip it around. Other frames show up in society. Countries where organ donation is automated or where it's sort of automatically assumed and you have to choose to opt out have a lot more organ donors available. Countries like the United States that are sort of freedom first, where you have to opt in, have a lot fewer organs to go around as a result. It's like checking a box to say I want to do this thing takes more work than going out and finding a box to say I don't want to do this thing. You have 100% donation essentially in Austria, like very high numbers in these countries. And when you have this only opt-in, you end up with pretty low numbers, like 4% in Denmark. It's funny because you think like, oh, Scandinavian countries, they're all like cousins, right? But then you see that gap, like 86% in Sweden, 4% in Denmark. So they're cousins, but they might not be friends. What is really making our choices? Well, a lot of our choices are made by really small, really sketchy frames. So how do you frame saving for retirement better? How do you frame it in a way that System 1 will care about it? Well, first, make it something System 1 has to do now, right? Start saving early. Think about that 12% goal. Like, give yourself rewards, maybe not monetary rewards, for hitting those goals, right? And saying like, yeah, I'm putting away this money and I'm doing a good job. And automate it so you just don't have to sit there and make a choice between like, do I want to eat this month or do I want to save for retirement? Just take the money away so you don't have the option and you can't eat. Invest aggressively because you've got a long way to go. Unless you're reading this or hearing this and you are, about 5 years from retirement or something, then maybe you should calm down on the aggression a little bit. For most of us, though, we can be pretty aggressive. And if you want to be really aggressive and you want to retire early, like Ryan, the fire guy, there's 3 keys here. You really got to reduce your expenses. Stop spending money. Like, watch those shows that are the extreme penny pinching people, like don't flush your toilet, right? Like, don't buy toilet paper. Other things about toilets, don't use hot water in your house. Don't turn on the lights. I don't know. There's a lot of ways to reduce your expenses, and they're all like really sad. Increase your income as well. Get another job. That's also sad. Like, work 3 jobs, and invest in your future. Right? Find ways to create passive income. Invest in real estate. Invest in the markets. Whatever you need to do. Somehow you gotta get those expenses down, so you're living on practically nothing, which means you got to buy a home, and a cheap home, and not be paying rent. Increase your income, get paid more, and invest in the future. If you can do those 3 things, you can retire early. Maybe. Hopefully. And if you are on fire, financial independence, retirement early, save more, spend less, right? I mean, that's sort of the key. But it also asks you a few other things. Is it worth buying a home? Like, is a home going to cost you more in the long run? Not in rent, but who knows about the rest of it. What about marriage? Can you afford to get married? Marriage is really expensive. Can you have kids? Kids are freaking expensive. What kind of job flexibility do you have? Can you leave a job that you hate but pays really well? Well, not necessarily if you want to retire early. I spend a lot of time on Reddit, obviously. And then there is a subreddit on financial independence retirement. And like half the posts in there are people that are like, I retired at 30 because my investments paid off, and you're just like, I hate you. But then the other half are people that are like, wow, I hate my job so much, but I got to work here for at least 10 more years before I can retire. What should I do? And it's like, well, I don't know. You have to evaluate like what's worth it to you, the money or the job. Like, what is a loan going to cost my future self? Like, what is buying a car going to cost my future self? What is taking too many hot showers going to cost? So think about that, a little bit of a survey here. What is your target retirement age? If it's near, how are you going to have to change your life to make that happen? And then no matter what it is, how do you frame your life so that you might actually get there? It's cool Sherlock Holmes stuff here if you want to follow up with that. Have a good week. I'll talk to you soon.